Hello and welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. Today, what are we going to talk about? The Board of Truth. I've drug it out, marked it up, because I really want to talk about how all of the failures lead to shit it's the fan. How all of these areas of our world all point to each other. Not just to shit hitting the fan, but everything's interconnected. And I say that a lot. I say it's all interconnected. It's like a spider web. Everything leads to the center where the spider sits, right? Well, in this case, in the center, I put SHTF for everyone. But I want to kind of go around the board and we can talk about the different sectors. I know a lot of people go, hey, look, John, right? Economics, it doesn't apply to me. I'm just a regular dude. Actually, the way I like to talk about it, it does affect all of us. If you've got no money in the stock market, that's okay. Guess what? At your place of work, the big boss, whoever the manager is, he's got a 401k. Not all Americans do, but the big boss, has a 401k. The guy that owns the company, he just doesn't have a 401k. He takes the profit that he makes and he invests it to defer his taxes, right? So you talk about just little people with little retirements, and then you got your big dogs. They're your bigger investors. They'll send $1 million, $2 million every year to the stock market. So what does that do, right? When we have a stock market crash, it affects the owner of the business, right? And that affects the manager of the business, right? It just costs the owner, the big dog, who you think of as the rich guy. He's the big investor that just lost when the stock market went, right? And then your boss, the manager, the executive, whatever his title and his place is, well, he just lost his ass in his 401k. He took it. You, as the regular guy, you're like, I got no money in the stock market, John. Doesn't matter to me. Well, guess what? That business just took it in the shorts. The owner's pissed, the manager's pissed, and now they're financially crippled. The company itself loses, and so you can lose your job, right? You get a pay cut, you get an hour cut, whatever. That's how the economy matters to all of us. That's how it, right, is going to lead to shit hitting the fan. So everything affects all of us, right? So let's start with, let's start with politics. Right, I got the most ink down here on politics, and I know you're going to have a hard time reading the small words. That's okay. I'm here to help. Right? So politics. How is that leading us to shit it's the fan? Well, let's start with tax and spend. That's what the government does. It taxes us, and then it spends the money elsewhere. That's a nice way of saying wealth redistribution, tax and spend. Well, the government has things it needs to do, so it's going to tax and spend. But where does it spend the money? Right? This is the interconnectedness. It taxes and spends on corporations. Right? It taxes and spends on the military industrial complex. Anything associated with military conquest, military development, military action, military research, public and secret military things. Okay, where else does the tax and spend go? It goes up here to the social strife category. That's right. Income redistribution to special interest groups that certain politicians will say, well, this group has been disenfranchised, or this group is been hurt, held back. So we need to give it special privilege. We need to financially care for it. So taxing and spending, right? And all of that leads us to shit hitting the fan. So let's move over here and look at oil, energy, right? Oil and energy affects our standard of living, not just in the United States, but everywhere. So oil is critical, right? Energy is critical. If we had to pay twice as much for oil, that would raise the cost of everything and our standard of living would drop. So we need oil, cheap, lots of it, or we're going to have shit hitting the fan. And it's easy to say, okay, well, stop delivering oil to the gas stations, the fuel, see what happens. See how happy everyone is, right? So the government, right, deals with making sure we have a good standard of living, right, by using the military to secure oil and energy around the world. They use some diplomacy, right, which is its imperialistic power, right? The power of the purse strings and the power of our military is used through diplomacy to secure oil to make sure we have a higher standard of living, right? Imagine how all the people in the social strife zone, that would be all of our socialists, all of our entitlement class, how would they feel if they couldn't go anywhere, right? If they were locked down because of high oil cost, because of a failure of diplomacy in the military to secure oil so that they can tax and spend, right? And then give the money to these jokers. You see how it's all interconnected? You take one leg out of this and we get in some big trouble, right? You know, let's take a look at the economy. What is a big deal with the economy is debt. How much debt is in there? Well, we've got public debt under politics. We've got corporate debt over here, right? And then we have personal debt, right? Personal debt. Public, private, personal. By public, I mean, or private, I mean corporate debt. Everyone is financing the future by borrowing and promising to pay back plus interest later, but it's failing, right? Because the economy is failing, this idea is failing. Now, if we run back over here to corporations, we have a kind of a fascistic system going, right? Because corporations control the government. They have a louder voice than we have. There was a time when corporations weren't allowed to influence politics. They had a very specific goal or a plan that they had to follow. The corporations have special benefits. They're a creature of the state and they weren't allowed. Now they're considered legally a person. Even though when, let's just take for example, J.P. Morgan breaks the law, right? Does insider trading, manipulation, violation of rules. Nobody goes to jail. They may pay a small fine relative, but they make sure that the fine is always much smaller than the profit, right? It's because they do kickbacks. Now, I'm sure if I ran J.P. Morgan and I looked at the books, and then I looked at the politicians and said, yeah, tell you what, I'm going to donate money to both campaigns so that no matter who wins, they're going to listen to me because of my contribution to them, right? Who listens to the people anymore? Does politics, do they listen to us? No, they divide us and make us hate each other, right? And they use social dynamics to do it, right? That's what politicians do with us. They get us to hate and fight against each other for a variety of social reasons and a variety of economic reasons. And it doesn't matter what we tell them. They do what they want. And even when they start doing what they want, they don't get the law passed. And even when they get laws passed, it's not what we want them to be. Right? We voted for Trump, right? Because he was going to drain the swamp. 2.5 years later, have we drained the swamp? No, we have not. Has even Hillary been arrested? No. Right? Even though we have evidence of a crime, even though we have evidence of who committed the crime, right? Who is it, right? It's divide and hate, divide and conquer with politics, right? But who is protecting Hillary? Well, corporations. And under corporations, I'm going to include banks, right? Because they are corporations. They're just a very special type of corporation that gets literally free money. They get paid interest on excess reserves, meaning they borrow money at 0% interest, and if they don't spend it and they keep that money around, they get interest on it. But see, they borrow at 0%, and then they lend it out at 2%, 4%, 6%, and then that bank that gets it at 2, 4, 6% lends it out to us at 8, 10, or 12%. You see, but the big banks, the mega corporations, right? They shield the power players. They shield the power players. That's our politics. Once again, this connection. You know, one hand washes the other, washes the other, washes the other. You see, so politicians pass rules that benefit corporations so they can turn around and come down here, right? So let's move over again to social strife. Race and racism. Race and racism is... It wouldn't exist if it were not for politicians using it as a wedge. Using it as a wedge, right? They play these games with social strife, race and racism. Right? They use it to get votes. Right? They use it to control people. Economic control. Your job is part of the economy. It is now controlled by social dynamics and the claim that there's racism everywhere. And part of that is immigration, right? We have the most powerful military in the world, supposedly. We're number one, number two, right? We're top two. We're in the Super Bowl every day. Yet we can't use that military power to control immigration? No, because it's a social issue, right? It's a social issue. But those people, these immigrants come down here and they affect our standard of living, right? They affect our standard of living. And what are we doing as a country? What are our politics doing? Right? They are doing world and nation building. Our country can't even manage itself properly. Yet what is going on? They want to tell other nations how to do things? They want to punish other nations? Right? And other nations want to tell our nation what to do, right? We have this diplomacy issue, and that's, right, nation talking to nation diplomacy. And when it fails, we end up going to war with the military and shit hits the fan. You know, it's about imperialism for nations. They want to make trade deals. They want, you know, special private deals. There's a lot of dirty, dirty secrets in diplomacy, right? When Trump goes into a meeting with Putin, right? When Angela Merkel, right, meets with Hillary Clinton, it doesn't matter the politician. They keep secrets. But guess what? Those secrets are revealed to who? Corporations and banks. So they're sure to get in first. So they can, in turn, right, get a big chunk of the economy, right? Make sure they are controlling, right, conquest and enrichment through politics corporations get, using the military and securing that through diplomatic trade deals, diplomatic special favors, diplomatic secrets, right? Energy and oil is always tied to war. Everywhere the military-industrial complex goes in the world, they have an oil and energy component to it. Sometimes it is about just plain old control, like North Korea, for example. North Korea doesn't have anything we want, right? But who does? Well, where has our military been the last, 50 years, right? Been in the Middle East. You know, right now Iran's the problem. Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Syria, Libya. Right now we also have Venezuela down in Central America, Central South America. We've got a lot of oil issues, energy, right? Because that has a lot to do with the control of the area economically, the control of the area through energy, the control of nations using our military because we are world and nation building, right? In other words, creating corporate and political, right, both domestic and international alliances, right? So we need to control all this. But when it comes to people, just the little people, right? We come back up here to social, right? How do they control us? How does the social stuff lead to shit hitting the fan? Well, they use income. Well, how do these social engineers and manipulators use income? Well, the way they do it, right, is by saying, look at that guy over there. He's got more money than you. You should be jealous of him. You should hate that guy you see driving down the street, right? The income disparity between the poor and the middle class and the wealthy, right? But we're not, whether you're middle class or poor or you make 200,000, 300,000, even $1 million a year, that's not the real rich, right? That is a social game designed to create strife using income as the wedge. right? So that social groups try and use politics, right? But it does not have, that doesn't affect corporations. That is politics and social engineering and politics and social engineering back and forth controlling each other, which is driving us to social disintegration, literally disintegration, between races, religions, economies, even geographies, age groups, you name it. They want strife, and they use income, they use race, they use nationality, immigration, they even use, for God's sake, sexual preference. They've made that a huge wedge issue, which falls back under politics. And they've socially experimented it with in the military, right? You know, the entire thing, all of this is tied together. They point to each other. They point to each other. But, you know, it's kind of like a circling toilet. Everything is getting tighter and tighter as far as the amount of money that's available, the amount of wits that people have to conduct themselves, the amount of debt out there is suffocating, right? The energy crisis that is coming, right? They can't afford to sell oil as cheap as they are, right? It costs too much. You know, the shale and the fracking, the Arctic oil, the fact that Saudi Arabia is almost out of oil, and they're having problems in other countries too in the Middle East. The oil is an issue. There's some good oil down in Venezuela, but a lot of it is too heavy. The fracking and shale oil up here is too light in the United States. It's a very light oil. What we've got going is we can't afford to produce the oil for what it's being sold for. At the same time, we can't afford to raise the price where it needs to be because the economy will fail, right? And as oil or energy prices go up, our food price goes up. Some things we just gotta have, and it's food, right? But who controls the food production now that's necessary for our economy? Well, corporations are now controlling food. Hello, Monsanto. Hello, Dow Chemical, right? I mean, a lot of these food companies, they're making chemical food. Literally chemical food. They're growing soy and they extract the protein out of it, and then they're going to call that a meat substitute product. You know, they're playing games with genetics because corporations want to make money, and the politicians make it okay. A product like milk in other nations, believe it or not, milk in other nations is a garbage product. We're being tricked and screwed over. The military is continually being used as a demonstration tool for the power and might of the American political machine, the American economic machine, right? The American corporate machine. The only reason the United States is being held up, or one of the main reasons, I won't say the only reason, but one of the main reasons that the United States is being held up is because the EU and China are failing. They aren't really failing diplomatically. They're not really failing militarily, right? They're not really failing because of energy. They're failing because their economy is so weak that people in the EU and people in China and the nations themselves are still choosing to invest in American equities and corporations. What happens when they run out of money to invest? What happens when the people that run the banks sell off, take their profits, and there's a collapse in the American economy? It's going to hurt other nations, their peoples and their economies even worse. Like the EU is in the middle of a recession. It's quietly discussed, or not discussed at all, but it's there. Right? So people in Europe, they want to buy our stocks, which is holding the United States up. What happens when we sanction through diplomacy or diplomacy failure other nations? They pull their money out of our economy. They pull their money out of our bonds, our funding. We have a massive, massive budget in the United States, right? And The United States, very corrupt. We have a debt and deficit program that's being funded by the rest of the world and all these other sectors. Our debt and deficit is affected, right, by the energy costs. It's affected by how much we have to spend on the military-industrial complex to continue to intimidate other nations, right? Our debt, right, is a lot of it's to blame the greed of politicians and the greed of corporations. See, corporations, they can't be held accountable. They can be taxed, but no one can be held accountable. Nobody goes to jail for corporations. It's a system of unaccountability. But where it's going to be most accountable is going to be when shit hits the fan. When something collapses, corporations get wiped out because of the economic failure. That's going to hurt the money the government gets. Right? It's going to affect oil and energy, and there's going to be military problems because of failures in diplomacy. We're seeing the pieces of that now. Diplomacy fails by politicians. So what do? We start sanctioning other countries. That affects our economy because the price for our standard of living goes up not just for energy and oil, but for everything we use on a day-to-day basis. Our food costs, our health costs, which are all managed by corporations, which are all regulated by the government. And what is the government all about? Right? The government is about the psychology of belief of freedom and voting. Our government exists with us because we believe, not me and you necessarily, but the people in general believe that they can vote for their leaders and that their leaders debate and that this debate produces the candidate with the best idea, and the best ideas go to Washington and they can fix things. Where on this chart, this shit it's the fan swirl of crap, has there been one solution where we go, yeah, we're doing great, this fucking sector over here is wonderful? People used to point to the military and say, our military kicks ass. Why would our government, through diplomatic channels, make economic threats to other countries for buying from the military-industrial complex of the Russians, the Su-400, or the S-400 missiles? Right? A missile system the U.S. is extremely fearful of because it has been demonstrated to be superior in many ways to the systems we have in the United States. Right? The military, I'm not calling them a failure, I'm saying the military-industrial complex, which is under the military. I don't know if it's failed, but someone else has definitely come up with a better idea. Right? They got a better widget. Right? So all of these, our social system here, that is how we deal with each other. Oh, let's bring in immigrants, right? Let's keep people fighting with race and income baiting. And let's develop systems that are designed to what? Destroy our culture and traditions, the family. Because we want big government to be the daddy and the mommy. So you come up with this ridiculous social engineering concept, right? Kids are confused. They don't know if they're boys or girls or if they're allowed to be what they want, right? They're all being programmed and told what they are. You think that doesn't have an effect on the economy? You think that doesn't have an effect on politics? Politics allows this crap, promotes it. It's absolutely infuriating to anybody who has studied this and understands the effects that these people are having. Right? I say get ready, get prepared, food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense, have all of that. Because every one of these sectors is interconnected with each other. And they're all pointing to and leading to shit it's the fan because they're failing. They're failing. The economy is sliding down. We're going to have an energy crisis. We're having more social strife. Diplomacy is failing. Militaries, right, are being positioned around the world for conflict. Right? And corporations are doing what? Making all the money they can for the executives, for the owners, keeping their stocks inflated. And all the while, politicians are doing what? It's incredible, right? They're letting the psychology play out. Oh, yeah, you guys are in charge. You, the people, when they're not, right? They're about conquest and enrichment, right? They're about divide and conquer. They're about controlling us, right? and hiding their corruption. And man, have we got corruption coming out with this Epstein thing. It'll be very interesting to see how big it gets, or if it gets anywhere at all. I sure hope that the corruption that has been hidden by politics and bureaucracy, because of corporate interests not wanting to be interrupted and banking interests not wanting to be interrupted. Believe me, it's international. It also is tied into the military. You think the military, or maybe we could just say the intelligence agencies, aren't aware of what's going on with politics? Right? CIA, NSA, I'm sure they have their own little games where they play divide and conquer with politicians. I'm sure they have their own little corruption scams that they have going in the intelligence industry. Right? They can make and break people really quickly. And they don't even have to tell the truth. They can make up lies about people. Oh, you don't want to play the game they want to play? Then they'll just make up a lie. And we're seeing it now. We're seeing it now in computer technology, where you can put your face on someone else and they can put words in your mouth. They can control or record what you're saying, either through your phone or when you're around a computer or Alexa, right? They can get your voice and voice patterns. They can make a computer created person looks just like you and show you on film committing a crime. They could do it to me, they could do it to you, they could do it to anybody. You know, computer technology is amazing. Look what it's allowing us to do here. We're talking over time and distance instantaneously. No problem. It's beautiful. I'm trying to talk about shit hitting the fan. You know, one of these computer guys could change this board and change what I'm saying and have me doing a terrorist, right, strategy to commit terrorism against the United States. They could come up with whatever they want. Right? That's what I'm saying. And so these people control those people, control these people, right? And you and I are just puppets, right? Everything points to each other, and all failures lead to shit hitting the fan. And as far as I'm concerned, all sectors are leading that way right now. So I want to thank you for supporting us here at the Prepared Mind channel, the Prepared Mind Network. Go, if you need anything, to the preparedmind.club, C-L-U-B. Do that. And I want to thank you for sponsoring us, right? Contributing. I get a lot of notes and emails every day, probably more than I can get through and certainly respond to, but I get an awful lot of information. And then your comments, you help each other. Understanding what's going on, and that this is no longer a game. It hasn't been a game in a long time, but people kind of think of it as a game, right? Like they're sitting back on their couch with a beer and popcorn. Right? This isn't a game. This is the world we live in. Right? And everything is pointing to shit hits the fan. Thank you again very much for this opportunity to talk to you in a special Board of Truth presentation. One of my favorite ways to do things. But it takes a bit of effort. And you guys make it a rewarding effort. So thank you again. I'll talk to you very, very soon.
Playtime is over. Get your Prepared Mind merchandise to show your support for the channel, stop censorship, and to tell YouTube they can smoke it. Get prepared now.